I could do an analysis of American Dad in many ways. I could compare it to its competitors like Family Guy and Simpsons. I'm not gonna do that. I could argue that the less Seth MacFarlane is involved, the better the show gets. I'm also not gonna do that. Or I could do an hour-long video just on the whole golden turd thing.
There's a turd made of solid gold.
A turd made of solid gold.
What the hell? Gold.
Cop killer!
To destroy it, we must return it to its source.
Nice of you to bring it back. Listen, you can't leave that thing in the bushes. Someone finds it and ruins your family's lives. What? Oh no!
I'm definitely not gonna do that. Instead, I want to ask a very simple question. Are the Smiths bad people?
Bad.
To answer that, we have to define what constitutes a bad person. I will try to make the argument that bad behavior and thus morality is context dependent. To explain what I mean by that, I want you to imagine a circle diagram. In the outermost ring are things that all people should agree are wrong. Things that are not up for discussion. Child abuse, genocide, low-rise genes. With these, there aren't exceptions to the rule, ever. In the middle rings are things we generally see as bad, but only in specific forms. With these, there are exceptions to the rule. The way these actions are performed make or break whether we deem them moral or not. Animal cruelty is bad, but 75% of us are meat eaters. Think also of something like bullfighting.
He's a big fella, isn't he?
Physical violence is bad, but several sports revolve directly or indirectly around violence. Boxing or even American football. In here also lives the things where receiver and sender greatly affect our judgment of an action. Sexual violence is bad,
Duh.
but somehow less so if it's done to incarcerated men. Outing someone as gay is bad form, unless it's done to a homophobic preacher or politician. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with these, just that they are pretty commonly held beliefs. The center of the ring makes up the vast majority of behavior that you and I exhibit on a daily basis. And it gets very complicated in here because context is the determining factor as to whether an action is deemed good or bad. A handful of examples. Sleeping with someone other than your partner in a monogamous relationship is bad. Sleeping with someone other than your partner in an E&M relationship is fine. Slapping your spouse around when you're pissed is bad. Slapping them around when you're both consenting adults engaging in sadomasochism is fine. Using a derogatory term for a marginalized group that you're not part of is bad. Using a derogatory term for a marginalized group that you are part of is fine. Or is it? You might disagree with that, and that's my point exactly.
Look, it's notorious FAG. FAG.
Power balance refers to what degree of power two opposing sides of any conflict has. An equal power balance is when both sides have the exact same opportunities. It's relevant to morality because it can affect whether a behavior is exploitative or not. Think of a boss hitting on his employees. The direction of action is also relevant because different roles hold different levels of responsibility. An exhausted toddler slapping their mom in a fit of rage does not hold the same significance as an exhausted mother slapping their child in a fit of rage.
To be fair.
Well, to be fair.
Without considering these things, we cannot fairly judge whether a person's actions and another person's reactions are valid or not. And that works both ways.
So let's get to the point.
So we cannot decide that something done by one of the Smiths is inherently bad without considering context. And context for us in this analysis is family history. individual relationships, personality, and social script. I will also argue that American Dad does not take place in our world, and thus we have to consider world building as well. So we have to go through each member of the family, and yes, that includes Klaus, and give them a proper description. As we move through the family, I will pair them off and go over significant conflicts that pair has had. And with each duo, I have picked 1 or 2 themes that ties into the question of morality. And finally, I will judge the family as a unit and the way they treat outsiders. And finally, I will discuss whether it matters at all if they are bad people.
I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. One thing.
Now, the show didn't really find its proper groove and distinctive form until about season 4. If you compare any Smith from season 6, 10, or 17 to their season 1 form, there will be differences. But if you compare them between season 6, 10, and 17, it will be relatively consistent. So with a few exceptions, I'm not gonna touch too much on the first couple of seasons.
Oh, for God's sake, Stan Smith of Langley Falls.
Stan is best summed up as a very expressive person. He's very emotional and he has a tendency to get jealous and insecure, most often caused by an inflated ego.
Come on, champ, give it another try.
Shut up! You're not my dad!
It takes extreme forms that 9 times out of 10 could have been avoided.
Oh, God, instead of just talking this through with Francine, are you gonna do something crazy?
Most likely.
He goes hard, whether we're talking hobby projects, a temporary obsession, or his emotional crisis. But that is also his good side. Stan is a passionate and creative and playful man.
Put it on the track, it goes fast.
And here she is now, baby Franny!
Francine is a tenacious and a very strong woman, but she will sometimes push down her feelings of discontent and end up going crazy when she has had enough.
Francine Smith spent her whole life thinking about her family, and what did it do for her? Nada.
She's temperamental, sarcastic, and sassy.
I forgot how much he sucked.
But she's also caring, doting, and loving.
Marriage is an equal partnership.
Is the power balance between Stan and Francine even? Yes. This is probably the most equal of the pairings in the Smith house. Stan and Francine are both temperamental and confrontational people, but they rarely seem scared of each other. They seem tuned in to their partner and they know when to take each other seriously and when not to.
How dare you? It could be my appendix.
Oh, well, then you'll need an ambulance, won't you?
The first episode I want to use to illustrate why I've chosen the themes of self-awareness and compatibility is Shallow Vows. Stan comes home from work, and as he and Francine greet each other, we get a foreshadowing of the conflict of the episode.
Hey there, beautiful. Bring that body over here.
I'm so lucky to be married to such a good provider.
It turns out their 20-year anniversary is coming up, but Stan forgot. Again.
Oh, I forgot our anniversary. I'm never gonna do that again.
Roger uses the opportunity to get some money out of Stan by arranging a big ceremony to renew their vows. In the process of planning said ceremony, Stan reveals that he took Francine for her looks, and this insults her greatly. So she stops doing her beauty routine, and as Stan sees the result of this, he promptly freaks out and runs away. Later, Stan tries to get used to his new reality, but when he is unable to, he blinds himself to be able to stand being close to Francine. This upsets her at first, but it actually facilitates the couple getting to know each other better. However, Stan's blindness leads to the next realization. Francine took Stan because he could be a good financial provider. And now that he's blind, he can no longer fulfill that role, and she has to work, which she does not want to. They have a bit of an aha moment, as it turns out they might be equally shallow. Things revert back to normal as Francine puts in the work to be good looking for Stan, in return for him being the sole provider. Self-awareness is essentially the moral of the story. Stan is upfront and honest about why he took Francine, and he's self-aware enough to know that her appearance will be a factor in their relationship. So while it may not be a very sympathetic aspect of his personality, it does show that he's willing to make sacrifices to make it work. On the other hand, societal standards tell Francine that it's wrong to choose a partner based on something as
Trivial as looks.
and she doesn't stop to question it. On reflection, however, she realizes that she acted just as shallow as he did. Deciding how much to consider outside opinions of your relationship is a delicate balance. Because of course you can be in an unhealthy relationship and need someone to talk sense into you. But that's very different than being happy in a relationship and only questioning it when you're faced with societal expectations of what that relationship should look like.
We're Stan and Franny, and we go together like a ding-a-ding-a-dong.
In the end, Stan and Francine are on the same page. They want the same thing. And as far as being shallow, they're evenly matched. And that's what I mean about compatibility. In a relationship, things like intimacy, family planning, communication style, and finances don't have a universal right or wrong solution. And though it's easy to judge their relationship as shallow and therefore unhealthy, when you consider their respective needs and wants, they're a really good match.
More examples!
We see these two themes pop up again and again. When they clash, they often do so because they forget that they're very compatible partners and they end up working against each other instead of together. And every time they do start cooperating, they and we are reminded how good they are together. In the episode Killer Vacation, Stan tries to keep it secret from Francine that he has to assassinate someone while they're on vacation. But when she finds out and he confesses, she of course offers to help him right away. In Paranoid Frandroid, Stan is producing the show Morning Mimosa to make his life easier by shielding Francine from the bad news of the world and only showing her fluff. But it's only when she finds out about his betrayal that she freaks out.
I'm in a conspiracy.
Stan's biggest mistakes are usually that he forgets just how capable Francine is, but also that she's loyal to him. Instead of remembering that she is a loving partner who will not only tolerate his craziness, but support and match him in it.
Even more examples!
Francine's shortcomings, on the other hand, is, as I mentioned, that she swings back and forth between two extremes when she is upset. She has to learn over and over again that she needs to find the middle road. In the episode The Boring Identity, we again see her tendency to let other people's opinion of her marriage affect her too much.
Stan usually coaches a team of inner city youth cancer researchers.
After Stan suffers memory loss, she tries to reshape him to a more palatable man, but she realizes that while other people like him more this way, she doesn't.
Real Stan would never dance to this crap. He'd hate this song.
And furthermore, they're no longer a good match, because the things she judges him for, that he is loud, crude, and rude, are also very present in herself. Hence why they're so good together.
We're too different. You're insensitive and crass and mean to people in the service industry. And Stan Smith is just not like that. You're both complete lunatics.
My verdict is that while Stan and Francine are both temperamental and erratic people, they do appreciate each other greatly. And they're both willing to admit when they're wrong and be the partner that the other one needs.
You two are made for each other. We really are, baby. We really are.
Hayley Smith.
Yes, that is her actual name. Hayley is outspoken, strong-willed, and rebellious, but not so much that she's not susceptible to self-esteem issues.
That's not yours.
That is not for you!
Come on, be serious. It's for the blonde.
She's insecure, proud, and pretentious.
The Cheesecake Warehouse is the leading cause of diabetes in the state of Virginia.
And sometimes that insecurity makes her compromise her values because she craves approval. It also makes her fall victim to manipulation by people more cynical than her. But when she figures out her mistakes, she shows that Smith willingness to take action.
For the first time in my life, I feel like I really did something to help the Earth.
Anita Smith.
Steve is very playful, creative, and expressive, but he's not exactly gentle as a kitten.
I'm Batman.
No, you're not!
He's also very insecure and he wants approval more than anything. Whether it's from his friends, the popular kids, and especially his dad. He often tries to impress his dad by adhering to stereotypical ideals of masculinity.
This manhood you speak of.
But he usually ends up proving himself by playing to his own strengths.
You'll regret it. I did.
Steve is sensitive and caring, and he finds strength in this to do brave things, like confronting his dad. A feat that Stan sometimes respects.
But it takes a real man to show mercy.
Is the power balance between Steve and Hayley even? Yes. As a narrative pairing, this is one of the rare ones. There aren't that many stories centering Steve and Hayley's relationship. Their conflicts also tend to be a bit tamer than some of the other ones. They're usually about the two of them hurting each other's feelings.
Come on, how hard is it to watch Steve? He doesn't even know how to get in trouble. He's a dweeb.
My favorite example of this is the episode Faking Bad. In this episode, Hayley discovers Steve's talent for making fake IDs, and she decides to partner up with him. In the process, their respect for each other grows, and it becomes a bonding experience. However, Hayley's pride shows its ugly face, and when she is put in a situation where she can either give Steve the credit and respect he deserves, or make herself look cool, she chooses the latter.
No, I meant my brother works for me. I just wanted to give that loser a break from building blanket forts.
Steve finds out and he replaces her as a partner with Roger, which is, of course, bad news. Steve is almost arrested by the CIA, but Hayley takes the fall and lands in prison.
I can't arrest my own daughter. Can you do it?
She does this as a way of apologizing to Steve, and Steve returns the favor and makes sure Hayley gets out of prison. Two things are important for us to judge Hayley fairly. The first one is that Hayley is quite insecure and very concerned with seeming cool to her peers.
I know, I'm sorry. They put me on the spot and I was just trying to look cool.
Her actions here are not motivated by malignance. She's not doing it to be mean to Steve. On the other hand, Steve is also insecure, especially when it comes to the approval of others. And Hayley absolutely knows this about her brother.
Yeah? Oh, I thought I was a loser.
You know who the real losers are, Steve? The ones who stay angry after being called losers.
Okay, I'll do it.
And that makes her actions less excusable. However, morality is not just about not doing bad things. It's also about taking responsibility when you do. And Hayley not only apologizes, she also takes the fall for Steve. She understands that the severity of her betrayal demands a big sacrifice. The atonement matches the transgression in weight.
More examples!
We see a similar story play out in arguably the best episodes of the early seasons, Dungeons and Wagons. Hayley breaks up with her boyfriend Jeff, and Jeff ends up getting into a video game that Steve is playing. Klaus is shown to also want to play, and Steve is rude to him, setting up his eventual betrayal.
Not ready? I've been watching you for 4 years! Nighttime!
Steve is very powerful, not only in-game, but also in real life. His prowess in the game gives him status in his friend group. Steve acknowledges this himself.
See, the problem is that in the real world, things often suck. But when I'm Agathor, there is no pain, no wedgies, no heartache, only victory.
The contrast between Steve's real life and video game life is further shown in the different animation style. As Jeff becomes interested in the game, he gives Hayley the cold shoulder, and she of course takes this out on Steve. And Steve's dismissal of Klaus comes back to haunt him as Klaus helps Hayley defeat Steve in the game. Hurt feelings being the catalyst to a conflict spinning out of control is a running theme for the entire family. When Hayley sees the effect this loss has had on Steve, she starts to regret her decision.
He's not destroyed. He's just very, 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 very sad.
Hayley goes through a lot of trouble to help her brother, and even though the quest brings her closer to Jeff, she rejects him in the end. She was really doing it for her brother. Unfortunately, the damage is still done and Agathor is lost to Steve, but the relationship between Steve and Hayley is mended. So overall, my verdict is Hayley's behavior is pretty shitty, but she takes responsibility for her mistakes and she's willing to try and make up for them. But what about Steve? Well, it really is more fruitful to look at the way he treats his friends rather than his family. So a quick little detour. Is the power balance between Steve and Snot even? No, not really. Steve is very much the alpha of his friend group, and it often goes to his head.
I am not Steve!
Forgive me, oh great and powerful Agathor!
And what I want to talk about here is status, and how it affects Steve's decision making. In the episode
Jenny from the block,
Steve tries to cheer up a heartbroken Snot. Unfortunately, he does this by getting Roger to help. This of course backfires, and Snot loses his virginity to Jenny.
Then I her! I finally did it, man! I'm not a virgin anymore!
This gives Snot sudden potency in the friend group, and Steve is dismantled as alpha. Interestingly, Snot exhibits the same level of arrogance as Steve. Roger calls out Steve for only being mad that he lost the position as King of the Nerds. And when Steve finds out that Snot actually lost his virginity to a stress ball, he decides that his status is more important than Snot's happiness. So he completely humiliates him in front of their friends.
This is what Jenny was using to fake sex with you. She didn't do it with you for real. You're still a virgin.
He does, however, quickly realize that he has made a mistake, not only seeing Snot unhappy, but Roger as well. He and Roger concoct a plot that gives Snot back the most important part of the experience, the status. Jenny promises herself to Snot and promptly fakes her own death. Snot is horrified at first, but as he realizes that he is still the one in the group who got the closest to doing it, he's easily cheered up. So Steve is willing to give up part of his status to make Snot happy and to make up for his mistakes. He shows not only accountability, but that he knows his friend and what is important to him.
Even more examples!
A party for the unincluded!
In this episode, the friend group is tired of being outcast and rejected, and they decide to throw their own party for all the other outcasts. The party is interrupted by time-traveling Snot and Steve, who come to tell their teenage selves not to go to their own party, because their unpopularity in high school is proportionate to their success in adulthood. A funny foreshadowing of the moral of the story comes in their respective reaction to meeting their adult selves.
We're so polished!
Steve, look at us! We're still hanging out!
A misunderstanding leads Steve to go downstairs to the party. Here he makes out with a hot homeschooled girl. Are there any other kind? Coming back upstairs, he finds that his future self is now distinctively less nerdy, but much more surface level cool. This of course speaks to Steve's insecurity, and it's interesting that the further away in personality future Steve is from present Steve, the cooler present Steve finds him. His future initially excites Steve, but as he and Snot tries to better the situation for the much more unfortunate Snot, they realize that the success of the first versions is caused by their friendship. And for Snot to become the best version of himself, their friendship has to last. So they do the only rational thing and utterly humiliate themselves so much that they will have to be losers together forever. This paints not only a very sweet picture of the importance of friendship, it also tells us a lot about Steve. Because remember, You might look at the different versions of Steve and think that the first one is the superior choice. But Steve gets a taste of what it would be like to be the epitome of what he thinks cool is. And that's how insecurity works. You don't just wish to be a little different than what you are now. You wish to be everything you're not. So the verdict is that while Steve is often tempted to go for status and attention and prestige, he is usually able to sort out his priorities and make the right choice in the end. And that speaks to positive moral value.
My name is Klaus Heisler.
Klaus is intelligent, relatively free-spirited and open-minded. His portrayal is somewhat inconsistent over the history of the show. I will get back to that later. He's a sensitive soul, but he's also pretty inconsiderate to others.
Francine, I enjoy a solitary corn dog at 3 a.m. Your presence would disrupt that.
And like the rest of the family, he is very emotional. He also has the family trait of acting out when he's hurt and taking things way too far.
Roger Smith!
Roger is energetic, creative, impulsive, and erratic. He's also extremely tenacious and a genuinely hard worker. He's true to himself even when that means disagreeing with everyone else.
You were passionate about drinking, just like I was passionate about running my bar.
And he has a tendency to hyperfixate on one thing for a period of time. Is the power balance between Klaus and Roger even? Well, almost. I will touch a bit more on this in the next segment, but for this episode, the power balance actually skews more to Klaus's advantage.
A small win for Klaus!
Which I find interesting. We will of course be talking about the episode Kloger. I'm sorry, we have to. In this episode, Roger is shown to be lonely and unhappy being single, with happy couples all around him. By contrast, Klaus is happy being single.
I'm a lone wolf, baby! Bam, bam.
Or is he? He and Roger end up unknowingly chatting to each other and meeting on a date, where Klaus admits he is lonely too. One thing leads to another, and they hook up.
That was incredible.
The central conflict is set up early, as Roger talks about what the family's reaction will be, and Klaus wants to keep it secret. We then see a montage of the couple hooking up in secret, but eventually they are discovered.
Oh, you guys!
At first they try to be a conventional couple, but they realize they want different things.
No, I hate this!
What?
Look, I don't want to be a normal couple, going on double dates with Stan and Francine. What made it hot was all the sneaking around. It was so wrong, so dangerous, so taboo.
Of course, things escalate when Klaus rejects Roger and once again someone goes to prison. The episode ends with Roger realizing that he was not so much in love as he was afraid of being alone, and time in isolation cured that. Now I know that this episode and the many scenes of Klaus and Roger hooking up leave some people feeling a little uncomfortable. And the thing is, because neither of them are human, they can't really be naked, and thus the show was able to get away with being pretty explicit. And I, for one, enjoy that kind of in-your-face thing. I also love that it's Roger who overcommits, because you expect it to be sad, desperate, and lonely Klaus. And the conflict makes sense. Two people who are not the best communicators hook up impulsively. The conflict arises when it becomes clear that they want different things. The reason I've chosen respect as the theme here is not about the conflict itself. It's about how they treat each other as intimate partners. And I'm sorry to have to point this out, but as far as the sex goes, they're both shown to be very considerate lovers. They care about each other's pleasure, and they adapt the type of sex they have to their respective atypical anatomy. We see Roger pouring water over Klaus as they make out by the kitchen sink. And I'm not joking when I say that that is worth something in its own right. You can absolutely read this as representation. Here we have two differently able-bodied people, one of which does not conform to gender as we understand it as humans, enjoying sex with each other. It's nice to see. Where they do fall into problematic behavior is in their miscommunication. Neither of them are upfront about their intentions. Perhaps because they're both pretty self-centered. The way they react to getting caught is very telling. Notice what they say.
Klaus and I are in love.
Roger and I have been intimate.
Where Roger is self-centered and speaks for Klaus without talking to him, Klaus in turn takes a conversation that should have happened in private and publicly rejects Roger. The bad things they do are very much on brand for both, but we learn new and positive things about both of them.
Even more examples!
We occasionally see them genuinely care for each other in other episodes as well. In 1600 Candles, Klaus is the only one who remembers Roger's birthday. And in Live and Let Fry, Roger helps Klaus get an inheritance by impersonating him. And when that turns out to be a setup and Roger gets beaten up, Klaus is there by his sickbed. Overall, I would say that while both Klaus and Roger's bad tendencies are on display here, we also see an open-mindedness and a care for each other that we rarely see from these two. Now you might be thinking, sure, but what about some of the combinations you haven't covered? Isn't the power balance more uneven between, let's say, Steve and Stan, simply by virtue of them being parent and child? Well, yes and no. Stan certainly has the power to determine what Steve can and can't do to a much higher degree than the reverse. Steve is aware of his own strengths and his father's weaknesses. He's perfectly capable of making it a fair fight.
He's probably watching me right now.
Oh, almost definitely.
There are plenty of examples of this throughout the show, even just in the episodes I've mentioned. Steve also knows his father. He knows that when his dad seems unapproachable, it's usually all a front.
Don't touch me! Get away from me!
Now, as I mentioned, Klaus is a bit of a mixed bag. Klaus is kind of difficult to place as far as morality goes, primarily because his behavior is inconsistent.
You knew all along! Why did you goad us on every step of the way?
Remember that crack you made about me not being able to enjoy portable things? Well, I can enjoy making you two suffer. You'll never get back those days you spent on hold, you asswads!
And the way people view him is inconsistent.
Sometimes we forget you are a man in a fish's body.
Oh, it feels so good to finally be validated.
The family go back and forth between treating him as a valid member of the family that they cherish.
You can't have him, Rogu.
Klaus is family. Klaus is family.
And then insulting him a lot.
Humans are talking!
And we see the same thing as far as how Klaus behaves.
Supposed to do this.
In a recent episode, the plot revolves around Klaus having brainwashed everyone into thinking he is cool. And he ends up taking over all of Langley like a psychopath.
Hi, sir. Just so you know, we love Klaus so much. Klaus is the best, is what we say.
He rightly gets put in his place in the end and completely humiliated, and he reverts back to his low status. However, the show and the family acknowledges several times that Klaus acting out of revenge is somewhat justified, like in the episode where Stan and Klaus switches bodies.
That's hilarious! Totally! Stan, I know this may be hard to hear, but you've been a jerk to Klaus forever. You had this coming.
And while Klaus is pathetic most of the time, he is shown to be capable of defending himself.
You guys don't respect me. I should charge you like a bull.
Do it.
Yeah, charge us.
Oh, damn.
The show also gives him redeeming moments, like the episode Dr. Klaus, where we learn that he's actually a pretty emotionally intelligent guy.
Hey, no one is dismissed! Not until you thank this fish! These are all his ideas! I'm just an authoritative mouthpiece!
Are these really all your ideas?
Yeah, they are.
Wow. Sorry, we didn't listen to you.
So in general, I see Klaus as an integrated part of the family. Francine saves him from the gas leak, and he's shown to take part in some of the family's most important battles. Now, Klaus does fall victim to a lot of physical abuse from the family, but here it's important to note that Klaus does not exist under the same rules of reality as the rest of the family does. He comes close to dying or actually dies several times, but he inhabits the body of a goldfish, and that can easily be replaced, and it is, many times. His physical safety is not as delicate as the rest of the family, so different rules apply to what is considered appropriate to do to him. This again is what I mean about context. Throwing a fish in a bowl into a wall, leaving him out of water, is obviously a dick move. But when you know for certain, narratively and in universe, that he will always be fine, it gains a different meaning. Because the tension is gone. It's like children in most horror movies. You know they're gonna be fine. So we can't really judge the things the family do to him without remembering the special rules Klaus exists under.
So let's get to the point.
So, 2 important takeaways. When Klaus or any other member of the family acts out, it's usually motivated by insecurity in some form or another. In Klaus's case, it's a lack of validation and approval and respect that causes him to act out.
Did you really think we hate you so much we'd let you die? You need to work on your self-esteem, man.
Why don't you take some fucking responsibility?
When the family wouldn't give me up, I realized maybe they do like me, which means there's room for both of us. And I was a fool to betray one of the most special creatures I've ever met.
The physical violence that he falls victim to, or is sometimes the perpetrator of, must be viewed in the context of world building. And I'll get back to that.
But I love my terrible family!
But what about how the family acts as a family, as a unit? Well, luckily we have plenty of episodes to choose from. And an absolute classic, in my opinion, is the episode where the feud with Santa is established. The episode centers around the question of whether Jeff should be a part of the family. Does he fit in? 2 storylines are running separately to come together in the climax. There's one about Roger making moonshine that's not terribly relevant.
Bonk, binka binka bonk, binka binka bonk, binka binka bonk, binka binka bonk.
Though it works to set up the place of the eventual battle. The main story is about Stan getting Steve a gun, with which Steve promptly shoots a mall Santa by accident.
He is not okay. He will never be okay, because he is, say it with me, dead. You didn't say it with me.
To protect Steve, the family bury the corpse. Then they all start receiving creepy letters, and it turns out that Steve shot the actual Santa. They all hide up with Bob Todd, the moonshine guy. Jeff shows up and inadvertently gives away their position by writing Santa his wish list. Santa shows up with all his elves and an epic battle commences. Santa offers Jeff a way out, since he is clearly not part of the family. And Jeff seems to accept at first, only to double-cross Santa. And as Christmas morning arrives, Santa is forced to leave, but not before swearing revenge on the Smith family. Jeff is then accepted into the family for real. The Smith family is shown numerous times to be loyal to each other when shit hits the fan. This is but one of many examples. Even though it's primarily Steve and Stan's fault, the rest of the family doesn't hesitate to help them, and they all band together in the final battle. And we see how commonplace this is for them by the fact that they have conversations about boners and Jeff being part of the family while they're fighting. I've chosen the theme loyalty because it's no coincidence that the thing that allows Jeff to become part of the family is a demonstration of loyalty. He double-crosses Santa and saves the rest of the family. He also shows that he fits into the family by insulting Stan, which is another family staple.
I did it for Hayley. She's my wife. And if you're important to her, you're important to me. Personally, I think you're an ass.
Well, how about that?
Even more examples!
Another common occurrence in American Dad is the world is ending story. We've seen a few of these, and the theme is almost always gratitude. And the person who's ungrateful is almost always Stan. One of the more recent ones is the episode The 200. We see Stan walk through a post-apocalyptic Langley Falls. He reaches his former house, now an empty ruin. In here he meets Lewis, and Stan reveals a large number of tattoos. These serve as a framing device to tell Stan's story, and through them we're shown incidents leading up to the apocalypse. The first story is Hayley and Stan going fishing. Instead of enjoying the time together, Stan was grumpy and rude to her. Back in present time, Stan partners up with Greg, and they go out into Langley to track down Stan's family, and on the way he tells the rest of the story. He describes an incident where Steve got hurt, and Stan refused to support and help him and dismissed his pain.
Flat on the ground like a pressed hot sandwich.
The last story shows us Stan not doing his part of the housework and being a bad partner to Francine. Through the episode, it is a refrain that Stan wants to make up for his mistakes. Lastly, he regrets not saying "I love you" before going on a mission. Stan eventually gets into a bit of a pickle and is saved by his family. Stan shows not only gratitude, but also approval of his family and the specific skills they bring to the table.
My kids are alive and capable!
It's revealed that the apocalypse was actually triggered by a blast that split Roger's many personas into separate entities. These are the 200. The family end up in between the 200 and the rest of Langley Falls, running towards each other for a big battle. We don't actually see the final battle, because right at the nick of time, Klaus saves them and the family is complete. The episode ends with a time jump to the family rebuilding the world.
I love you guys so much!
To summarize, this episode contains many of the themes I've covered so far. Stan is self-aware enough to admit to himself and others that he was being inconsiderate. The family's different skills are very compatible with each other. Stan takes accountability for his mistakes and makes amends. He also shows respect for his kids and his wife by acknowledging their strengths. So while the story centers Stan and the lessons he has to learn, it shows a picture of the family encompassing several of the values I've covered so far. That all leans toward good morality. Since we're on the topic, apocalypses happen quite often on the show, and it's not exactly the only abnormal event we've seen happen over the last almost 20 years of this show, which is why we need to talk about world building. Because world building is also context, and therefore it must be considered. If we look at the family without considering the world they live in, it's easy to conclude that they are all just horrible people. For one thing, they are a pretty violent bunch.
Oh yes, there will be blood.
You're my little girl. Now, if you still feel you can pull that trigger...
So, have you heard anything? Is Chaz gonna be okay?
No.
Okay.
And on a smaller scale, they're also all rude.
Oh, we have a good back and forth, you and me.
I've had better. And Jenny loves snot!
Ew.
Francine, I enjoy a solitary corn dog at 3 a.m. Your presence would disrupt that.
I'm Batman.
No, you're not!
Look at you two. Best case scenario, you're telling me you're gay with each other.
It's just a lame-ass puzzle metaphor.
If we judge their behavior by the rules set in our world, they do come out looking bad. But despite the many references made to places,
I dreamt of Paris again last night.
People and things that do exist in our world, it's an alternative version. Different rules of reality.
Jesus Christ, you don't know the rules? There are certain rules.
Many events contradict each other chronologically. The world ends several times, and time jumps show different futures, and so on. Some of these are of course just continuity errors, but for the most part it just goes to show us that this is a different kind of world. So we really need to look at how other people in American Dad behave, so we can compare them to the actions and behavior of the family.
In fair Langley, where we lay our scene. And who are they?
Oh, that's Stan and Greg, the homos from across the street.
And get this fakakta ghoul off the car!
That's your navigation system, hon.
At the corner, take a flight!
Shut up!
You know about her drug problem?
All too well, but I don't have time to deal with it. For men like us, Stan, for men of power and authority, well, there's career and there's family. And sometimes you have to focus on what's important. And that's career.
Is that Francine's voice I hear? Look who made a speedy recovery. No.
Capoeira, bitch! That's Brazilian dance fighting. I'm trained.
Ah!
Oh, I guess we started.
Hey, Smith, I gotta get ready for my party tomorrow night, so I don't have time to pick on you.
No problem. I'll pick on myself.
Thanks, man.
I mean, I never would have had the patience to do what you did.
Oh? What's that?
You remember? You found that guy who was an embarrassing jerk, and you were gonna fix him up. How's that going, by the way?
I love your beard. I hope I can grow sick facial hair like that when I'm a crusty old Debbie like you.
Hey, Jackson!
I have a face muffin in the toaster.
Like you give a rat's ass when anyone does. You've stolen babies and sold them to underground dinner clubs.
How dare you? That was pillow talk.
I hope you get the point I'm trying to make. The rest of Langley and the world at large exhibit pretty much the same levels of horribleness that the Smiths do. When push comes to shove, people around them exhibit just as much violence as the Smiths do. So the family doesn't really stand out as far as awful behavior. People, recurring characters, and passing ones are generally quite awful.
God, you're annoying. Everything you say is annoying.
I've tried to show that each member of the family is capable of putting up a fight. They are all pretty equally self-centered, erratic, and expressive. And that affects how we should judge their character and their actions when they clash. Context is looking at the full picture. We have to be mindful of someone's weaknesses and the intention behind their actions. And in addition to that, we have to look at their response to making mistakes and hurting their loved ones.
Hayley, you spent a lot of money on this limo and you're not even saying woo.
I just got a lot on my mind.
Oh, that sounds awful.
Taking responsibility for your mistakes and being willing to atone for them shows positive moral value.
Everybody makes mistakes.
And while the mistakes made by the Smith family seem like grand ones, in universe, accidentally disfiguring your daughter's face is not exactly that extreme. Another thing to consider is social script. Established patterns of language use, attitudes, and jokes within a certain group. Different friend groups and families have different ways of talking to each other. So different statements hold different meaning and weight depending on the group. My family is not the kind of family who throws around "I love you," whereas other families use it as a stand-in for goodbye or see you later. If I told my sister "I love you," she would either be worried about me or respond with sarcasm. Whether a joke is insensitive is largely dependent on audience. And anytime you make a joke, you have to take responsibility for knowing your audience.
Anyway.
Even something like swear words are social constructs. A swear word is only bad if it is established as bad. Me saying fuck or fucking in my home country is very different than saying it if I was having lunch with a fundamentalist Christian living in America. So, to summarize once again, I tried picking examples that showcase not only the bad morals of the family, but also the good ones. But we run into some problems here, because significant growth is hard to do within the confines of this format. Animated shows tend to be locked in time, no matter how long they run for. Lisa and Bart have not aged in the last 78 seasons of The Simpsons. And animated shows tend to let the world around the characters evolve and follow the historical time advancing around them. The Smiths have technology that matches the time the episode aired, but the characters stay locked in time. Stan and Francine have been shown to be young in both the 80s and the 90s because it had to fit with them being in their 40s now.
The same dish she ordered on our fourth date, which took place October 17th, 1987.
The show's chronology is a bit iffy, but it's hinted to be set over a period of a year or two. One indicator of time passing is Hayley and Jeff's marriage. They get married in episode 100, and they have their first anniversary about 10 seasons later in Please Please Jeff. Another indicator of time passing is in the episode Stan and Francine and Connie and Ted, where Barry references the time he didn't take his meds in with friends like Steve's by saying this.
As you may remember, a few months but what seems like years ago.
I know that the several Christmases and a couple of Thanksgivings contradict this, but the point still stands. The format of an animated show, locked in time, matters to the question of development. It puts a limit to the amount of growing a character can do. This means that the characters tend to learn the same lesson over and over again, and that again affects how we should judge their character. If chronology doesn't work the same way it does in real life, then we can't really hold it against them that they don't learn their lessons in a way that has a permanent effect. But they do actually learn their lessons in a way that correlates to their distinctive personalities and individual weaknesses. The theme of these lessons is almost always learning to appreciate each other and to show gratitude and acknowledge each other's value. The confines of the format is why I've chosen to look at each episode separately. I feel like this is a more fair way to judge them. So yeah, I am slightly disregarding personal development on a bigger scale.
Oh my god. It's finally clear now.
So, are they bad people? Meh. They certainly would be if they lived in our world. But like I said, they don't. They live in a world of apocalypses, murder as a regular occurrence, violence right, left, and center, people being violated and humiliated on TV, corruption on all levels of government, aliens, supernatural elements, time travel, and so on. Even on a smaller scale, they live amongst people who are horrible to each other and the people they love all the time.
Now is your chance to destroy those figurines you hate. Oh no, Greg! They broke the figurines!
But the family shows again and again that they are loving and compassionate and loyal to each other when they need to be. And as far as how they treat their other loved ones, they show many positive traits here as well. Stan is regularly conflicted in his job when he has to do something that hurts the people he cares about. Steve has a long-lasting, usually happy friend group that show the same level of compatibility and loyalty. Hayley has a relationship with Jeff that, while sometimes a bit frustrating, is built on a foundation of love. Francine is shown to have a good relationship to her parents, and she shows great respect for her cultural heritage. Klaus and Roger do not really have many recurrent relationships to people outside the family. But they are loyal to the family. And while Roger usually only does good things when it's part of his persona, Klaus cares about his family and their well-being. I really think they are a nice family. This might be a good time to mention that I really don't like Family Guy. And the reason for that is pretty much the opposite of what I've been trying to argue in this video. I don't think the relationships between the different members of Family Guy are equal. I don't think they show compassion for each other, and I don't think they have many redeeming qualities. Peter and Lois are not compatible. The direction of the punching is usually down, and I don't think the families seem to have a lot in common or show togetherness. And in American Dad, that's the thing I love, the togetherness. The family is erratic and rude and aggressive, but they all are. They all lose their shit once in a while.
Did you know DNA is in poo? 'Cause I sure didn't.
But they stick together and they stand up for each other when it really matters. When they hurt each other, they take responsibility and they make amends. So in my opinion, they're good people. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is satisfying narrative. And in the examples I've shown, I do think they tell stories where the growth matches the conflict. Where the growth matches the conflict.
Well, I gotta go. Gotta get to work. See you tonight. What are we doing? This is crazy.